Well, hey everyone, it's Hudson, and welcome to this setup addendum for Firmware 2.0 for the Nikon Z6 III. So before I launch in and talk about what's new and different in the Z6 III and how it's changed my settings, a couple quick things to keep in mind. One, it's important to have watched the original setup videos that I did when this camera launched, and you can click to see the original setup video right here. I did a video at the same time, if you look on YouTube, just kind of walking through all the changes in Firmware 2.0 and talking about what I think is cool and what I don't think is cool, and just about Nikon's firmware in general, so you might find that interesting. And in that same vein, there's a playlist on my YouTube channel for each camera that I do setup guides for, where you can click in to see what videos I've done on that camera since its launch. You know, for example, the Z8, Z9 playlist, since they're almost the same camera, has 37 videos in it, you know, from the time that those cameras launched. 37 videos involving those cameras that I've done in the interim. So people that maybe watched the setup video originally and then they see some brand new thing and they're like, wait a minute. Well, there's a lot of ground covered in between. So you can always find all the videos on the Z6 III in its playlist on YouTube. Also, I'm launching a setup file that you can, it's just my settings saved from this Z6 III onto a card. You can download them from the free section on my website. Click right here. I've got all my camera settings there. You download that Firmware 2.0 settings file and just load it in the menu, in the setup menu, load settings, boom, it'll have all my settings in there, and then you can follow along this video without having to scramble to change the settings. You can instead say, ooh, I disagree with that, pause and change it back to whatever you think it might be better at. So that's really handy. A lot of people have asked for that and I've started doing it and it's very popular. So I do have an updated Firmware 2.0 settings file for the Z6 III on the website now. You can run over there and grab it. All right, so let's jump in. Let's talk about some of the cool new stuff and what I've done differently since Firmware 2.0, because it is a massive firmware update to this already capable camera. It really does make it compete in that flagship camera territory with the Z8 and the Z9 at a lower megapixel that's better for low light and hand holding. All right, I guess the first thing I'll jump into is how I've changed my controls. And I've changed my controls in just my general PASM, the manual, aperture priority, shutter priority program modes. And so to get there, we'd go into the custom settings menu and we'd scroll down to controls, F, and to custom shooting controls. And you can just see I've changed the function 2 button to be recall shooting functions hold. All right, so in that standard knock around mode, maybe I'm in single frame, maybe I've chosen to be in autofocus single servo to lock focus with a pinpoint autofocus on some subject I'm trying to perfectly focus. Then all of a sudden I see a bald eagle swooping down out of a tree towards me. And you think, wow, I'd love to be able to just instantly be in action mode without even flipping into U3 just to touch a button, because I don't even have time to reach up and push the button and lock it into U3 and re-grab the camera. So when I go in and I look at what I've set, you know, you go in and you choose recall shooting functions hold. Functions hold means I touch that button and it stays in the settings that I have instantly programmed until I touch the button again to go back to where I was. And I've said manual shooting mode, shutter speed of 1/1250th of a second, aperture as wide open as possible. I set it at f1, it'll get as close to that as it can. ISO sensitivity is at the base ISO, but with auto ISO turned on. And then it comes down to the AF area mode is 3D, manual focus, subject detection options, autofocus, manual focus, subject detection. So auto, you know, just in case maybe it's a person doing something crazy, maybe it's an airplane, maybe it's a car, maybe it's a bird. If you're somewhere out in nature and you really think it's going to be a bird, you can flip it to the new bird detect subject detection. But I'm choosing auto for my own self in general. And release mode, high speed continuous. So instantaneously, you're suddenly in, you know, 3D area mode. It's just as simple as touching that function 2 button and bam, you're in there. Okay, now ironically, I have something completely different in our user 3 settings, which is our action settings. And this is the only real control change I have in the user modes for Firmware 2.0, and it's because we get recall shooting functions hold. So I'll go back into the same controls, custom controls shooting, Again, function 2 button becomes recall shooting functions hold, but it's a very different set of settings. All right, I'm not changing any parameter except one, and that's turning subject detection off. And why would I do that? Well, if you're like me and you've shot a lot of wildlife in action, you find times where sometimes the background is complicated or the animal is complicated. You know, a dark animal with dark eyes, but it's got a big white spot on its back, and for some reason Nikon subject detection thinks that that spot's an eye, boom. Or a butterfly with a false eye on its wing, and you can't get the camera to focus on its face because it's trying to focus on the false eye on its wing, which is, you know, that's its natural defense mechanism, right? So by hitting the recall shooting functions hold button, suddenly, boop, your subject detection is turned off. Now you can put your focus point, say your 3D focus point or your wide area focus point, whatever it is you're using. You probably want to be in 3D. Actually, it should be in 3D too, now that I mention it. So subject detection off, and area mode should be 3D. Boom, right? So those two things being on, done, set it so it's a 3D tracking point with no subject detection. And so that suddenly becomes, I put that 3D tracking point on the face of the bug, and boom, it says that that butterfly's face is what's important, and it's not looking for any eyes to get thrown off and pulled away from the thing I told it is important. The leopard hiding in the dense brush with branches and things in the dark, and you put it on the leopard's face and eyes and lock it, and it's not getting fooled thinking that some brightly lit branch in the background is the important subject. Everyone's had that happen. This is the way to solve it, and recall shooting functions hold is the only way I know of to, at a button press, be able to turn subject detection on and off. I wish Nikon would give us that in function buttons so we could use recall shooting functions hold for something different in our action shooting, but so it is, and it's cool that we get it, all right? The other thing I do in the menu settings, and we'll talk about this in a minute, is again in the custom settings, not in F, coming up into display, I go it way down here in display 19, half press to cancel manual focus zoom, and I turn that on, all right? And what does that mean? Well, I should probably be in my M mode that I normally live in instead of user 3. This isn't very important in user 3 because you're doing autofocus stuff. See, that's on in that. So I want that on. By default, it's off. That's a new setting that we get in Firmware 2.0. And what it means is that, say you're working with a manual focus lens, like I love my 51.0 Voigtlander, and it's tricky to focus at a 1.0 in a low light situation on an eye. But with manual focus subject detection, you see the eye get highlighted with a square around it in the frame. You press the OK button, which we have programmed in these settings to zoom to 1:1 and track the eye. And then you can manually focus it perfectly. And now with that setting turned on, that half press to cancel manual focus zoom, you half press the shutter button, it goes back to a fit view and you fire, you compose and fire. So instead of having to go and hit the OK button to cancel the 1:1 magnification, that's wired to a half press of the shutter button. And that's really nice. It's one less thing to do while you're sort of trying to get that perfect manual focus, especially with a moving subject. So it really is a nice addition. And then the other things that I've done to the settings that have changed, if you download my settings file, is I've added two things to the My menu. And you can always add things by just going Add Item and choosing them from the menus, right? You could say, I want to add in A1, right? Now I can say, where do I want to put it? Under Format Memory Card. I can say, I remove items the same way. I don't want that A1 in there, so I just hit Delete. Boom, it's gone now, all right? And so what I've added to my menu is the focus limiter setting. We'll talk about that really quick here in a second. That lets you set a distance area that the lens will only focus between. It won't go any further, it won't focus any further away, it won't focus any closer than your limiter settings. And I added auto capture to the My menu. That's it. So let's talk just a little bit about some of these really cool settings, and I'll show you where they are in the camera. We talked about it for a second with recall shooting functions, but if you hit the I menu and you go into the AF area mode subject detection, you can now choose bird detect autofocus. It's just in there with animal, people, automatic, vehicles, you know, aircraft. It's all right there. I don't really want to leave it on aircraft, but let's put it on people and let's go wide area like I like. Boom, all right. So that's set, or maybe 3D, whichever, whatever you want. It's all right there. It's so easy and quick to change, right? There it is. All right. Auto capture. We just put it in the My menu, but its location by default in the camera is in the photo shooting menu. Auto capture. Boom. You can go in there. When you set it, you have all kinds of parameters that you can set. You know, are you looking for motion near, far away? What? It's kind of like the focus limiter. You can say between this area and this area, I'm looking for motion. I'm looking for motion that's moving slow, that's moving fast, large or small. There's lots of videos out there about how to use it. How long is it going to record? What subjects are we looking for? And then you can leave your camera set up like a trap and go off and get coffee, and it'll be capturing anything that you programmed for it to capture while you're not even running the camera. It's pretty nuts, and it's pretty flagship camera stuff. I never thought that recall shooting functions and recall shooting functions hold and auto capture would be offered below the Z8, Z9 level. It's pretty amazing that they put them all in the Z6 III. Half press to cancel manual focus zoom. We just talked about that. Focus limiter. So that is located, again, we put it in the I menu, but it's in the focus settings. Oops. You go into the A settings, and it's, I think, A10. Nope. It's focus limiter is A15. Boom, you can turn it on, you can set the range. Again, one really nice thing too is that the autofocus on button, you put your focus point on the thing that's the nearest that you want to focus on and set the near limit, and then you can point up to the far thing in the distance that you wouldn't want to focus anything further away than that, and press the shutter button to set the far distance. And you can set the limit by looking through the viewfinder at your particular scene. It's nice, right? And just remember, if you're going to turn that on, to turn it back off when you're done with it, or else you're going to wonder, why is everything out of focus that I'm shooting? Focus point border width, that's the one that's at A10. And that's something that people that are a little bit visually challenged love, to make the focus point in the viewfinder a little bit more bold, a little bit easier to see as it's running around the frame. I think 2 is a nice setting, actually. I'm going to change mine to that as well. Playback speed. That's a really cool thing when you're previewing videos, right? I shot this little video here at 120 frames per second. You can see it says 120p, right? That's about 4 times slow motion. But if I just normally hit play, you know, there's not much going on in this video. It's just a video of the studio where I move the camera a little bit, all right? Nothing. I was just kind of testing this. When I'm sitting here in the playback menu and I haven't hit play yet though, and I've got a video file, I can go into the I menu, and at the very bottom of that I menu now is playback speed. And you can choose to play it back at half speed or quarter speed to kind of preview your slow motion. And now when you hit play, it's going to be very slow, all right? And that's nice. You can get a preview of what does my slow motion actually look like in camera, which you couldn't do before. And that's a really, really nice thing, all right? Just remember, again, you're going to want to turn that back off when you're not previewing slow motion. So go back to original speed. C15 has been added to the high speed menu, so high speed capture. So you got single frame, low speed continuous, high speed extended, and now C15 comes in alongside 30, 60, and 120 in those JPEG high-speed capture modes where you can do pre-release capture and post-release capture. Those are JPEG only, but it's nice to have a slightly slower one where you're not getting so many frames for certain situations. So I give them kudos for adding more choice for us right there. All right. There's so many other things going on too, like pixel shift shooting is now available in auto exposure bracketing and focus stack shooting, focus shift shooting. Those aren't things I'm going to use. I got a video about why. You can click right here, but I tend to think that DxO Pure Raw, OM1 Resize AI, Photoshop's Super Resolution, which is my tool of choice generally, or even Topaz Gigapixel can give you just as good, if not better, result in real-world situations where, you know, everything's not held perfectly still. With pixel shift, a little bit of motion in the scene can throw everything dramatically off and really reduce your capture quality when you're trying to blend 16 frames. So, again, you can watch that video I just linked and see my take on it. I'm a big proponent of capturing 100% highly focused, well-exposed frame and increasing resolution on that, or shooting a panorama, really well focused and exposed, blending those, and then you can add more resolution. The sky's the limit for what you can do with a well-exposed frame out of any of these cameras and get exactly the same resolution benefit that you get from pixel shift shooting. Now, pixel shift in a completely controlled, darker circumstance like a still life where nothing can possibly move and the lighting's all controlled can get you, better noise performance in a low light situation, can get you better color fidelity by sampling all the colors on the pixels, can get you more resolution, but out in the real world, it's pretty tough for things to stay static long enough to get much benefit from firing out enough frames to increase resolution. That's about it. Those are the major changes, but it's a lot of change and it's very, very cool. Again, make sure you've watched the original setup videos that I did for this camera. This is just an addendum to those. Check out the playlist for this camera. I'm doing videos every single Thursday, not just on Nikon, on photography topics in general. While you're watching this, I'm off with a wonderful group of photographers on a workshop on the Southern Oregon coast down near the California border, and having a blast. I hope you're all out there being creative and having a blast too, staying safe. And I hope you'll check out more videos on the channel and subscribe and share it with your friends. Thanks a lot. Bye.